million people had some secondary education, and just under 3.5 million South Africans acquired their senior certificates, with only 1.3 having acquired higher education, and this from a population group of about 46 million. But the other issue that we faced, of course, as you can see from these statistics, was how to deal with this massive illiteracy problem. A nationwide literacy program was launched in 1995, and it has had huge success. We have our pensioners now completing their school certificates. We have people who have never been able to pick up a book, reading and writing books as well. There was a saying in the apartheid era, and it was said as an insult to us black people. It said, if you want to keep a secret from a black man, put it in a book. So education for the black man in South Africa became something of massive importance. It was considered to be the only way that we could realize our need for self-determination. Our government faced a formidable test with all the problems that it had, and it has done remarkably well to date. But although the government is working hard to rectify the imbalances in education, clearly the apartheid legacy remains and will take longer than the 16 years we've had in power to overcome. Two huge challenges that we faced from 1994 was in the areas of the rural communities, the poorer areas, which, as I said earlier, were not considered to be part of the traditional apartheid South Africa. There was no infrastructure put into these areas. They were just wildernesses, basically, where people lived. The families were typically raised by women because the men were taken to work in the mines. So children grew up with no father figures. And the mother became the head of the family. And what this meant was that these kids were forced to, number one, go without schooling for the most part. And number two, when they were in a position to go to school, they were not taught in the language that they spoke, in their mother tongue. They were taught in Afrikaans. And Afrikaans was considered to be the language of the oppressor. This became such a problem that ultimately, in the mid-1970s, the school children across South Africa decided that they would boycott school because they refused any longer to be taught in Afrikaans. They wanted to learn in their mother tongue, or they wanted to learn in English. So this then brings us to the problem of language. We have 11 official languages now in South Africa. And the problem of trying to incorporate them all into the educational system is something that we're still battling with. Because whilst in theory, any child has the right to be taught in their mother tongue, in practice, no school can afford to have 11 language teachers for whoever wants to learn. So this is still a problem that we're battling with. In the rural areas, it's not quite so difficult, but it is becoming increasingly problematic in the urban areas where people are taking positions where they want to celebrate their tribal cultural heritage, and so they want to learn in their mother tongue. Apartheid also left us with a massive shortage of maths and science teachers, and as recently as 2003, our learners' maths and science scores were amongst the lowest in the world. This is being redressed as well, but it's a slow process because it obviously involves not just teaching, but it means reteaching the teachers. Another problem encountered once the school system was desegregated was that although there were white teachers in black schools, there were no black teachers in white schools or in most of the universities. And whilst many institutions of learning from schools to universities believed initially that they had transformed by allowing black students through their doors and accepting the token black teacher to teach an African language, they have not. The white Eurocentric culture portrayed the assimilation or melting pot syndrome, where the organization remains the same and the new entrants are expected to change. Thus, resource development was recognized as a crucial area. As mentioned